Hi there, Jonathan Fields, and I am here today with another episode of Good Life Project. My guest today is San Francisco painter Ann Ray, and we're going to get into her really remarkable journey because she hasn't been painting for her entire life. In fact, she took a big stint of time doing something that is a little bit unusual for most painters. So awesome to be hanging out with you here, Ann.
Thank you. Nice to see you, Jonathan.
So we're hanging out right now in your place in San Francisco, and behind us is some of your gorgeous work. Mm-hmm. And you now earn your living and spend your life as a painter here.
Yeah.
But when I first met you a number of years back, you had sort of like come out of a really interesting journey.
Yeah.
So take me back in time a little bit.
Well, I think when you and I first met, it was maybe a year after I'd started.
Yeah, it was right around then.
And so I was a typical cubicle dweller before that. Of course, I went to art school and I studied art, but I abandoned it.
So why? Well, what did you study? I mean, what did you actually study in school?
I actually studied industrial design and graphic design was my minor, and I just thought I can't possibly major in painting. That wouldn't be very practical. But my desire was to paint and to draw.
But let's dive into that, right? Because,
Okay.
because this is really fast, because so many artists go through that exact same conversation. It isn't
Right.
practical.
Right.
Deconstruct that a little bit for me.
Well, I think that it's not practical for the most part, because when you go to art school, there's no instruction on how you're actually going to make a feasible living after you graduate. And in fact, most don't. And so, I was just, couldn't ignore that reality.
Right.
But even with that, I majored in design, which is a much more practical career choice. But I wound up abandoning that too. For over 7 years, I didn't paint or draw anything.
So when you came out of school, did you complete, like, the moment you left school, you did something else, or did you try it for a little bit?
No, I was a designer for a while, and I was an industrial designer. Yeah. And I was supposed to move to San Francisco, wound up in the suburbs with a mortgage, and who's now an ex-husband. I really tried to live... I think I tried to live into certain expectations. And
what were those expectations?
Stability. Financial stability, a good career. I'm a first-generation American, and there's just certain expectations that you're going to build a certain life in a certain way. And so I don't think my parents were very thrilled that I was going to be a fine art major. Right. And but long story short, I wound up becoming very depressed and very anxious, and really, I would say I had a pretty severe walk through the desert for 7 to 10 years.
So, and what were you actually doing to earn your living then? So you walked away from
I walked away from design. Yeah. I did so many different things. I worked for disaster relief for the federal government. My last straight job, I was a project management consultant. I was a development director at a battered women's shelter for a while. None of it makes any sense. I just did, I think I was making different attempts to find my career or find a place, and all that time I wasn't painting or drawing or creating anything. Right. And it wasn't working out very well.
And meanwhile, emotionally, it's just taking a toll.
Yeah, it was really bad. But, suffering makes great art. So really.
Okay, we can't just leave that out there. I know you say it in jest.
No, it's suffering,
so much
and then there's
mythology around. Maybe it's not mythology.
Oh no, I have a big opinion about this.
Right, so let's go there because this is a huge thing in the world, not just of painters, but like musicians, anyone who feels like they're creating art.
Right.
Let's talk about that.
Well, in fact, and I wouldn't just park it there, because it doesn't make great art if you then can't function and get it out in the world so that people can respond to it. And I really actually am very much against that mythology. But the fact is that art is inspired by emotion, and deep, raw emotion inspires beautiful songs and amazing paintings. I actually started painting again as a response to trying to actually treat my own anxiety. My anxiety was off the charts, and I was taking all of the pharmaceuticals that you get with anxiety or depression. Nothing was working. And I thought, well, there's that whole field of art therapy. Maybe I should just sort of do that on myself. And then I had a very extraordinary encounter, which jump-started my painting again. But it was initially used as a way to just still my mind.
Right. So tell me about the encounter.
Well, what happened was I was struggling and I was trying to find my way in the corporate world. I was obviously not very happy, not very well suited.
Yeah.
And so I wound up going to a personal development workshop, and I bumped into some author who was there because he was suffering from writer's block, and I thought, I must be suffering in the same kind of way. And the conversation wasn't really all that long, but of course I remembered it because we had this grief in common. And then a week later, I went to go visit a friend back home, which is Ohio, and she was really urging me to pick up my paintbrush again. She said, I think that if you paint again, then it could alleviate some of your anxiety. And that's really what's probably the core cause of why you're suffering. And I said, yeah, well, I can't do that. I've left it behind. And
it was sort of like that deeply ingrained that that's not the practical life, and I need to live the practical life.
Not practical. So fast forward. Well,
let me.
Yeah.
So the expectations that you were talking about, like living that type of life, was a lot of that coming from family or friends or just the people you were around?
I think it was my environment. I think it was my family. I think it didn't look very stable. It didn't look,
So were all these places that you felt the expectations were coming from, were they aware of how much you were suffering and what you were going through emotionally?
I think some were and some weren't. I maintained a stiff upper lip as much as I possibly could. But yeah, it was pretty bad for a long time, actually. But when I went to visit my friend, we wound up going into an art gallery, and I was standing in front of a painting of a seascape, and it was this beautiful. It was representational, but it was also very simple and elegant, and it just struck me. And I wound up getting teary-eyed in front of this in response to this painting. And I thought, what was that? And so we slipped outside. We sat down on a park bench, and I said, I just can't ignore what happened there. That was really amazing. And I said, all right, so get that watercolor set that you have hidden in your trunk, and let's go paint. I'm going to paint. And in that moment, I looked up, and 10 feet in front of me was the author I had met 1 week earlier, 2,000 miles away in San Francisco.
It's like an omen.
I felt like a lightning bolt had struck me. And my father's grave, it's a true story. I couldn't ignore it. And I knew that was it. That I didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but I knew that ignoring my creative urge, just that I couldn't do that anymore, and that there was something was about to shift fundamentally, and it did.
So where do you go from there?
Where did I go from there?
Yeah.
Well,
because at this point you've also built a life around a certain, even though you're miserable, earning a certain living.
Yeah, I did.
But you've got like stuff and bills to pay.
Yeah, mortgage. Yeah, and stuff like that. What I did was when I got home, I signed up for a painting class, and I didn't really need the painting class, but it gave me some structure to make sure that I would paint at least once a week.
Right.
And then not long after that, I met Wayne Thiebaud, and he encouraged me, and he. So
for those who don't know, who is Wayne?
Wayne Thiebaud is. You'd be very impressed right now. He's probably one of the most significant painters in this gen. Yeah, he's alongside the art history books, alongside Andy Warhol.
Okay.
Not a similar stylistic or artistic approach, but it significantly impacted art.
Right.
So we had a conversation. And he said, "Yeah, you should really be pursuing this." And I said, well, that's great. Now, how am I going to do that, Wayne?
Was he a friend at this point?
Yeah, I was in his studio, and at that time, his canvases were starting to sell in the secondary market for over $1 million. Wow. He had a retrospective touring the nation, and it was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Mm-hmm. So, when he says, you've got something, it was worth paying attention to. Mm-hmm. Then I asked him, and his words to me were, I don't know, I'm not a businessman. And then in that moment, it was another moment of complete disconnect. And I thought, well, the IRS thinks you're in business.
Right.
And I thought, why are artists having this conversation that business and art are oil and water?
And that's been going on forever.
Yeah.
But maybe it isn't actually. I mean,
it's not really.
Because
if you look at Andy Warhol, it certainly wasn't.
Right. I mean, and there's this really long history. I don't know if this story is true, but supposedly, like when the Sistine Chapel was painted, like that was a commission that was one of the most miserable of his life, but he did it for money, fundamentally. Mm-hmm. That's part of the mythology that I've been told. That may not be right, but I guess the example is just that I wonder if like this construct that art and money don't mix is more sort of like a modern American thing than it is something that was sort of like has been passed down for decades, like centuries and centuries.
It's a good question, actually. So when I'm teaching seminars on business and marketing to artists now, and one of the things that I'll do is I'll look at artists through history, and we examine what their unique value proposition was and who their target market was. Because that's the only reason they're famous, is because they had a unique value proposition and they had a target market. And it's fascinating. And then artists suddenly can relate to marketing by having that conversation.
So I want to circle back to that and
sure,
definitely go deeper in it. But let's go. I want to finish the story also.
Oh, okay. Now, which story am I talking about?
So we're back on Wayne.
We're back on Wayne. Okay, so
you've got something. Okay, you've got to do something with it.
Yeah,
and then he shares about business. I'm not a businessman.
I'm not a businessman, and I thought, well, I have a great deal of respect. So I didn't say the thought cloud in my head. I didn't say out loud, but but I thought, okay, all right. So what do I do? Was my question to him, and he said, well, I'll give you a letter of recommendation, and it'll get you an entree into any number of galleries. So I said, okay, well that'd be great. So it did actually, and then I found out what the terms were, and I thought, well, no reasonable business person would ever agree to these terms.
In terms of to be represented by a gallery? What are they? I'm curious.
Well, I mean, most galleries, they take 50 or 60%. That's fine. I think that's their fair share. Mm-hmm. The problem is that they don't want you working with any other galleries within a square or within a radius that they define. Mm-hmm. And if you, let's say, are approached by a collector, they want you to send that collector to them. They don't want you getting in on their action. And it's just this scarcity, permission-based model.
So it's sort of like the feeling is they built the world. They're the gatekeepers.
They're the gatekeepers.
So that they control the terms of access to.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them don't even pay their artists. So they don't pay them on time, or they don't pay them at all. There's it's for the, it's not unlike the music industry or traditional publishing. Yeah. And so I did work with galleries and representatives for a while, and then I wound up signing up for this painting retreat with Gregory Kondos, who is Wayne's friend, and I wound up getting laid off from my job, which I didn't like anyway, so that was all right. And I thought, oh no, how am I going to pay for this? So I got really inventive on how I was going to pay for it. And I just wound up writing a letter to everyone I knew and said, I'm going to the south of France to paint, and if you would like, I can, bring you a small canvas back for a certain investment. And so I wound up making a profit, not a big profit, but a profit. And I thought, well, what am I doing? Work with the galleries then.
So you covered your trip. You made a little bit of money.
I went to England too. Went to see my family.
And you went to Europe and painted. And it was all through you.
Yeah, I just wrote letters. Right. It cost a stamp. I had to write the letter, and
back in the days of letters.
Letters work.
It's amazing. They do.
People open them. So that was sort of a moment where I thought, okay, well, hold the phone. I don't know that I need to do things this way. And what was really beautiful about it was that people were so happy with the fact that when I made these pieces, I was thinking of them, and there's a relationship. And so that painting then had more meaning for them than if they bought it from a gallery and never met the artist. So
there's another like big sort of like thing that goes on in your head, like, there's another way. Okay, and this starts what in motion now?
Well, it really got me questioning all the assumptions, including the assumption, from my mentor, who's incredibly well respected, that somehow we're not in business. And I just questioned it. I looked for books on how to market art, and I couldn't really find much that was just giving the advice of just here's how you get to a gallery versus.
So it's like all signs were pointing towards you have to go through the gallery system, and that's what the business is.
Yeah, that's the business model. That's the market. That's the channel of distribution, and that's it. And I thought, well, I don't know that that's true. And actually, interestingly, at the time when I got laid off, the job I was doing was project management consultant for a music distribution company, and they were being. The music industry was changing significantly, and artists were starting to own their own platform and distribute their own music. And I think that I'm just realizing in this course of this conversation that I think that had an impact, and that do you really have to go through a major record label? Obviously, that's not true anymore. Right. And so if it's not true for musicians, is it true then for visual artists? And is it true for authors? And so I don't know.
I guess any creator. Any creator. Individual creator or artist.
Yeah, if you're willing to take the reins and embrace the fact that you are an entrepreneur by the very nature of being an artist.
So this is so curious, right? So I'm a writer. I earned my living when I was in high school painting jean jackets, like when we had album covers. I was a painter when I was a kid. I would steal away for like days and days and days in the basement, taught myself how to. I made some big mistakes. I oil painted jean jackets. Don't do that, by the way.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Doesn't last very long.
No, I wouldn't think it would.
Yeah. But there's it's interesting because there's this definite, like, in writing, music, whatever it is. So now we know, okay, the world is changing, like technology is changing. We can own our platforms, we can own our distribution vehicles. The cost of it rounds effectively to zero. You can trade time for money.
Right.
But here's the big but, and I'm sure you deal with this all the time, which is that you can do it. But most artists don't want to do it.
Right.
They just want to do their art. So
tough.
Right.
I mean, a dentist might just want to clean teeth, right? Or a lawyer might just want to write briefs, but too bad. If you own your own firm, you own your own enterprise, you have to. And sorry.
So it's like tough love. I mean, and I think that's the realization that so many people are coming to. It's like when you hear people, so I'm in publishing world, right? I write books, and so many people are like, well, how did you find your agent? Like the average agent, I think my agent gets, like a couple of thousand query letters a month and takes maybe a dozen new clients a year, and then they submit to publishers and stuff like that.
Right.
And then people are like, now, well, everything's changing. If you want to, you can build your own platform, go online, and slowly over months and years build your own relationships and stuff like this. And,
which are powerful.
Right. And you may not want to do it. But, if you then complain about the system beating you down, you lose the right to do that.
Right. Exactly.
Because you have the means and the wherewithal to go around the system. So if you choose not to, you don't, it's like, if you don't vote in the presidential election, you can't complain.
Can't complain.
It's kind of the same thing.
Yeah, no whining. But the thing is, creative people are in a position, because the fact that they're creative, they can come up with very inventive marketing strategies. And so they're in a good position if they'll embrace it.
Right. So let's talk about how you did exactly that. Because you're sitting there and saying, okay, now I actually need to be able to make some like real money.
Yeah.
And
in a hurry. I live in San Francisco.
You're moving it, right, San Francisco, like not exactly the most affordable place in the world.
No, I don't recommend it.
So you did something really fascinating and creative to sort of like approach making the jump into the art world and also being able to generate a living.
Yeah. So my initial model was I approached wineries and I offered to paint their vineyards and then sell them the reproductions that they then sold in their tasting rooms or gave to their very best customers. In exchange, they would host me at tastings where I would sell the originals. And so I did that for a while.
So how did you get to that?
I made it up.
But I mean, what was the idea behind, because you're thinking, okay, was that just the first thing that popped into your mind, or were you sitting there brainstorming? What are the?
No, I did I sat with a friend actually in my living room, and we just did a blue sky session, and we just wrote down all of the possible ways I could make a living. I think he was worried about me, which is rightfully so, because I moved to San Francisco without a plan. Right. You know, I have my brother is the dean of a business school, and he's like, "Good luck," you know. So we just wrote all the ideas that came to mind, and I thought, okay, well, you know, I was painting contemporary landscapes, and then I realized that, you know, those paintings of vineyards seemed to be getting attention, and then I thought, people buy art when they're on vacation, and people certainly buy art when they're drinking, and and I made the assumption, well, people who collect wine might be the same or inclined to collect art. Right,
just a crossover in the market.
So it was just a big fat guess of a really half-baked business plan that I had no business background, and so we just kind of put it together, and then I moved away from that model after I met Bob Proctor and created something that serves individual collectors, and I'm actually much more satisfied with that.
Yeah, so that was sort of like the thing, that was the first step that got you.
That was the first step.
Realizing, okay, I can actually...
press.
Yeah, and I can approach this differently.
Yeah, it was validation. I can afford to pay my rent in San Francisco, and I'm getting a little bit, I'm getting this media attention, so, okay, well, I guess this is working.
What was it like to get the media attention, by the way?
I just thought, I was great. I mean, I don't know. I hadn't really thought about it too much. I just looked at it as part of a marketing effort. It didn't make me feel any different.
Right. I mean, did it feel in any way like validation of your art? Or were you just kind of like, this is all pure business?
I get the validation from my art from the people who collect it and when they respond to it emotionally. That's where I get that's where I really get the validation when they're moved or it makes them feel. That's amazing. That's really amazing. That's why I work so hard, so I can have that and I can give that. That's how you really get paid.
In more ways than one.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so I moved on from that model, and now I have this experience of art and this art and wine pairing program. And the experience of art is where the collector can choose their favorite landscape. And I thought, well, why am I just painting vineyards? Why don't we just let an individual collector choose what's important to them and what's meaningful to them? And I was commissioned to paint Bob Proctor's garden, and he was coaching Ellen DeGeneres and his production team at the time to beat Oprah Winfrey's ratings, which she did. And then we were at dinner one evening, and he said, "You really don't want to sell paintings." And I thought, "Yeah, I do. I want to sell a lot of paintings." And he said, No, you don't. It was really, do you know what it's like? The fact that you came here and you walked around my garden with me, and I saw your charcoal sketches on my kitchen table, and I peeked out the window and I watched you paint, and I know about you and I know your story, and you made this for me for my birthday. That is what you want to offer people. So I didn't quite know how to translate that into a specific offering at the time, and I still had contracts with major wineries, so it took me a while to evolve the concept, but that's my primary offering now. And then And then I started this art and wine pairing program, which is really based on the salon concept and just a simple art of conversation. And so I have fun inventing these ideas.
I mean, that's what it sounds like. It's like, you definitely have the art side to you, but you also definitely have the entrepreneur and the business.
Oh, it's so much
side
fun.
To you.
It's creative.
Right.
It's fundamentally creative.
And to me, that's art.
It is art.
I love coming up with marketing ideas and slogans and campaigns and design, stuff like that. To me, it's another way of just doing your art.
Yeah, it's another form of expression. And, painting, you have a blank canvas, and at the end, you've got a painting. And with business, you have an idea, and at the end, you have money, or you have jobs,
or some new innovation, or something that changes people's lives.
That's making an impact on people. Product product is, and it could be it could be a song, it could be a poem. Yeah. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
No, but I mean, it's interesting because we keep circling back to this, and I think part of the reason is because we're in the midst of a major shift.
I hope so.
In just the way that art and that artists not just survive. I think survive is the wrong word. Survive is the baseline.
Yeah.
But thrive, flourish.
Thrive. Artists who thrive.
I think that's the future for those who would undertake to own it.
Right. And I don't think that the skill set that's required for the average entrepreneur, it's not rocket science. And I think that people may be intimidated, but most reasonably intelligent people, if you persist, can learn the basics of running a business. And there are certainly lots of organizations out there who can help, with that. I mean, I went to the Small Business Development Center and took QuickBooks classes. And I mean, I started at ground zero. Even though I worked in a cubicle, it did not give me any experience in knowing how to run my own business. I'm still learning. I'm still eager to learn more. And
as the technology changes around us so rapidly, there's no end to it. It's not in sight.
No, it's treadmill.
But the other side of that coin is there's no end to the possibility now either.
Yeah.
So as things evolve and we have access to people's scales, the cost scales to nothing.
Right.
I open my eyes. It's funny, in the publishing world, I keep making the analog. There's so many people who've been in the traditional system for so long that are complaining a lot and feeling a lot of pain. And I get it. You've built certain expectations.
Right.
So I'm much newer to that world, and I come at it from a world of entrepreneurship.
Right.
And I look at it and my jaw drops because all I see is possibility. I see disruption, and disruption to me is possibility. Mm-hmm. And so I love writing. I care so much about language and words, but I want to be in control as much as I can.
Yeah, because you're in control of your craft then.
Right. So I look around and I'm like, good for disruption.
Yeah.
Because there's no such thing as disruption without opportunity or possibility.
Oh, I like that.
So you also, people start coming to you and saying, you seem to have figured something out here.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about that side of your
Yeah, well, I actually couldn't, to be honest, when I received some media attention, artists started to contact me and ask if I could help them with their business and their marketing, and I honestly sort of shooed them away in the beginning, and because I was busy, and then someone made this very astute observation that one of my favorite things to talk about was marketing strategies, and he said, well, why don't you write a blog? And I thought, I don't know how to write a blog, but all right, maybe I'll write a blog and I can get it off my chest. And then someone said, why don't you give a seminar? And I thought, I don't know. I said, okay, well, maybe I will, because I really do like talking about this stuff. And I am so sick and tired of the starving artist mythology. So maybe I will. And so I did, and it was one of the most highly attended and highly rated seminars. And I thought, maybe I have something to teach. And so on an unlimited basis, I work with artists. And it was interesting because I thought it's just going to be a bunch of painters who show up to these seminars. And it was filmmakers and musicians and all sorts. and there's clearly this disconnect between creative folk and business folk.
And money.
Yeah, which is not right. Well, interestingly enough, I mean, if you think about it, some of the highest paid people are creative and creatives, and then some of the lowest paid are creatives.
Right, and in the middle tend to work 3 jobs.
Right.
And create a fraction of the amount of time that they want to create. Because it's interesting.
Yeah. So anyway, I started to do these seminars, and my plan in the future is to develop a course online, because I was getting inquiries from throughout the country, and obviously they can't make it to San Francisco.
Right.
So that's my plan, to just share what I've learned, and hopefully it'll be of help to others. I don't think it's as hard as a lot of creative people think it is. I don't think it is. I mean,
Why do you think people? I mean, why do you? I'm always so curious about this. Like, what is the mentality that says it's harder, we shouldn't do it? I mean, what's the why behind?
I think
that?
it's a cultural thing. You referred to it earlier. Is this something that happened in our culture, in American culture recently, that somehow there's a disconnect between business and art? And I think it's a conversation that we have. And, I got it from my own mentor, and all throughout art school, don't worry your pretty little head about money. Or if you have a conversation about it, I mean, the painting professors are not in a position to answer those questions. I was actually on a panel in Berkeley, and it was successful artists speaking to budding artists or other artists, and one of the tenured painting professors was on the panel, and we were all asked the question, so what do I do after I graduate? How am I going to make a living? And he piped up and said, don't worry about it, man. Like, it'll all just work out. And this woman who became an instant best friend, who was sitting next to me, who was a very successful printmaker, turned to him and said, F that, people are buying art. What are you talking about? Don't tell them that. It's irresponsible. If you're a tenured painting professor, then you don't have to worry about it. And I think that's why it's not addressed. Because they're covered.
Right. And that's where most of the information is filtering through.
Yeah.
And then I guess, like you said, then you go looking for other information that all points to the same direction.
Yeah, and I looked and I couldn't find anything. And so I just started reading about marketing. I just started doing it on my own, and still doing it on my own, still trying to learn as much as I can.
Yeah.
But I think that's why there's a disconnect, because that's where the information is being filtered. People who are not interested in taking it on as an entrepreneurial endeavor. Bless them, but they're not interested.
So the experiences that you talked about now, which is a lot of your focus, it seems like that gives something much fuller bodied, to use the wine analogy, to your
Cabernet,
to your clients and your collectors.
Yeah.
What about you? What is that? How do you experience a much more immersive sort of engagement with your clients?
What's really been interesting to me is that people book an experience of art as a gift. So it winds up being somebody's significant birthday gift or wedding anniversary, or in the case of this series, she's just celebrating this transition of motherhood. She's her daughters have graduated from high school and they're in college, and she's enjoying a new chapter in her life. So in this case, it was a gift to herself. So I'm very conscious of the fact that what I'm participating in is creating a gift and ultimately a celebration. And I feel honored to participate in that. I feel like the work has meaning beyond a painting because of that. And so when I'm creating these studies and I'm doing that, I'm writing about it, which then gets placed in this book. And it's interesting to me. I think sometimes they're more jazzed about the book than they are the painting, because it's telling their story. I mean, it does discuss my creative process, but I'm talking about how I met them and what I'm responding to, and it's the story. So what was your question? Your question was
how you experience it personally, because
it's more meaningful.
Right.
It's just more meaningful because I know the intention behind the commission was that it's a gift or it's a celebration, and it inspires me. And then because of the way I approach it, I'm really doing this very thorough, creative exploration of these various landscapes. I get this really intimate sense of place with each one of these commissions, and it allows me an opportunity to explore and be inspired by nature, which is really is interesting to me creatively. Whether it's the Russian River, or this series I did of the aspens and snow and Deer Valley, I just get a different connection. And I just, it's not just, there's painting on my easel and I'm interested in it and I'm doing a series and it's just sort of random. There's very purposeful. So for me, that's inspiring to know that there's this purpose behind it.
That emotion that made you well up when you stood in front of the seascape, that was the big moment that sort of defined your shift in career path.
Yeah, it did.
Do you reconnect with that when you paint now?
Oh, I never even thought about it that way. But, art is powerful. And, it's energy. That painting healed me, in a lot of ways. I used it to keep myself present. And I found that, anxiety is usually a preoccupation with the future, and depression is a preoccupation with the past, in my experience. And so, by painting, I can stay present. And I think that's what happened to me in that moment. I was just fully present with that painting, and it walloped me. And then when I present paintings, the finished pieces to people, and I see the expression on their face, I think, they're present. They're fully present. They're engaged and fully present with that piece. And I created it. It just makes me so happy. But yeah, I don't know if I answered your question or not.
Yeah, no, that was it. Which is actually perfect segue to the question I love to ask everybody.
Oh, what's that?
Which is, the name of this project is Good Life Project. In your mind, when you think about the phrase, to live a good life, what comes up? What does it mean to you? What do you feel about it?
Wow. Well, I can speak of it from my perspective because I know I'm living a good life now, and I can appreciate it because I feel like I was living a far less of a good life before. The difference was that I think then I was afraid, and I was living my life based on certain assumptions about what defined a good life, and that included a mortgage and a stable job with a dental plan and a 401k, and that wasn't a good life. So I think it's being who you are, truly authentic, truly engaged, and looking for ways to create something that is of value to other people or has value. That for me, that's good life. And the basic things are taken care of. You can pay your rent, and you can, have reasonable financial stability is very important. And I think once that foundation is covered, it's meaning that's important. And everyone has different ideas about what's meaningful and what's important and what's valuable. So I think that's the definition of good life. And health is at the top of the list, of course. You have to be healthy to enjoy these things. Yeah. I think it's Maslow's hierarchy of needs we're discussing here, isn't it?
Not to a certain extent, but there's a lot of question about whether Maslow got it wrong too in a lot of people's minds. So.
Oh yeah.
There are a lot of people that are coming around these days and wondering if the top of the pyramid actually is a little bit more important than maybe people thought. But anyway,
it is important.
I like your exploration of meaning. I think that's very cool.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank
It's been an awesome conversation. So again, I've been here with Anne Ray, who's a San Francisco painter. You can find her at annray.com. And I'm Jonathan Fields signing off for Good Life Project.